you know, framing matters. And what I mean by framing matters, how a story is told is as important as what is taking place within the story itself. And I don't mean this from the standpoint of just fairy tales. I mean this from the standpoint of how we look at our world, how we look at our society, and how elements, particularly from the standpoint of media, are framed in ways that completely miss a more overarching story while simultaneously giving a perspective. Meaning, being objective is not really objective. Objective to what standard? Things can be told in ways that don't necessarily get across the overarching narrative or the overarching point. For example, if Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating her curds away, along came a spider and sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. Now, from that standpoint, this girl is just sitting here minding her own business, and this dastardly spider comes down. It's gruesome and terrifying. It terrifies her and scares her away. Little Miss Muffet is a good person in this. She's an innocent. That fucking spider. Now, by the same token, though, couldn't this be told from a different perspective, where the spider was just minding its own business, and this person, being a drama queen, flipped out and ran away? What makes the spider so gruesome in this case that the spider becomes the villain of this particular story? Purely perspective of Little Miss Muffet. I guess I'm saying how you frame the story matters significantly on who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and what is the overarching thing that needs to be focused on within the story itself. Star Trek. Pet thing of mine that I like. This particular Star Trek universe, we look at this as somewhat of a utopian society, even though utopia doesn't exist. And couldn't someone take a perspective of, this seems to be a fascist government that outlaws all of these certain things and have all of these laws that people need to accrue by. Now, from the standpoint of the lens of the Star Trek universe, it is a soft lens that they put on this particular society because, again, from the perspective of us, this looks like a utopian world. What is the perspective of the Marquis? What is the perspective of the Klingon Empire? What is the perspective of Romulus? All of these are just various perspectives in the same way that the Starfleet universe is a perspective. None of these perspectives are necessarily right, even though you get the perspective of the rational human being because you yourself are a human being. I would imagine the Marquis would say Starfleet stood by while land was taken. You may have other aspects of the Starfleet universe that don't necessarily like the rule set, and if you talk to them about how that world was constructed, they will probably have a different perspective of things. I've even heard it argued the Star Trek universe is a fascist universe. Fair enough. I'm making the point that how things are framed matters. Let's go to something that I consider to be dramatically good, and that a lot of people, particularly people who are dealing with this, consider to be dramatically good. But for whatever reason, the news media, when it's reporting this, takes such an odd lens in the reporting of this particular thing. Now, my premise: baristas, cooks, meaning the people who make your food, the people who serve your food, or waitresses in this case, the people who bag your groceries, the people who beat that ass for wage, of course, and haberdashers, the people who make your hats. All along the spectrum of people who do a particular job but aren't necessarily maybe paid the best. They're at the bottom rungs of the economic ladder. Now, I make the contention that if you work a decent day's wage, work for the course of a day, particularly if you're talking about 40 hours a week, and many people more, you should be able to live off of what you make. I don't care what the position is. If you work in this society, you should not be one of the vulnerable who are on the edges of the society itself. You should be able to make a living. The federal wage, minimum wage, is $7.25 an hour. I think $7.25. Many of these states have gone beyond that, but fact of the matter is, no one can live off of $7.25 an hour, meaning that you could work a full day's, work a full week, and still not have the ability to feed yourself, not have the ability to put a roof over your head, and certainly not to live in any level of comfort. I don't think people should be vulnerable. Now, oftentimes people make an argument of, well, I only make this much. Why should they make X amount? And this seems to be a backwards argument to me that takes the argument of the top 1% of having the bottom edges fighting for one another, as opposed to the person saying, yes, I want that person to make a living wage, but I also maybe need to be making more in the capacity of what I'm doing. You don't have to immediately take this perspective that the bottom is somehow doing something wrong. As a flat fact, in the way that I look at the world, my lens is, if you work a decent week, you should be able to pay, feed, clothe, and handle the responsibilities that are accrued to an individual in our particular society. It shouldn't be a situation where you work all week and are completely vulnerable. Now, minimum wages were increased in various states across the nation. This is people trying to get to the point of being able to take care of themselves and feed themselves. Not everybody, however, is looking at this with a certain degree of a good thing or success. Take a look at this. This is 9 News. Prices rise as the minimum wage increases in several states. Yeah, prices are rising. In some cases, prices don't necessarily have to rise. I mean, it is the capitalist that is making the determination on how much he's going to pay the people at the bottom. And he's going to accrue a certain degree of excess to himself. Maybe some of that excess that he's accruing to himself can actually go to the people at the bottom, in which cases these won't necessarily mandate increases or wages or price increases. Just saying. And they go into this. The state and local wage laws come amid a multi-year push by unions and liberal advocacy groups to raise the minimum wage $15 an hour nationwide. Yes, because even at $15 an hour, that is not enough for people to take on the responsibilities of being a person. Meaning paying for healthcare, paying for education, paying for their kids, that's assuming if they have kids, paying for somewhere to live. You shouldn't have to make a choice between whether or not I can pay for this medication or whether or not I can pay my rent. Can we change that as a society? Can we change that? Can we do better than that? This goes into the argument of, yeah, man, those people got their wage increases so they can live a relatively decent life, but now other people have to pay for it. Other people have to pay for it. Meaning it is better for that waitress to have low wages as opposed for that waitress and people having to pay a little bit more on their eggs, as opposed to that waitress being able to live and have a relatively secure life, and juxtaposed against you paying 20 cents extra for your wage, for your eggs. Come on. A 2-egg breakfast will cost an extra dime at $7.39. The price of a 3-piece chicken dinner will go up 20 cents to $8.78. The reason: Missouri minimum wage is rising. Wiggins said that the price hikes are necessary to offset the estimated $10,000 to $12,000 in additional annual pay that is staff as a result of the new minimum wage laws taking effect on Tuesday. Yes, people are paying 20 cents extra for an egg, while simultaneously other people are being able to live a decent life because they're getting a higher minimum wage. You can look at this in the terms of 20 cent extra egg, or you can look at this in the terms of people are going to be able to have additional money to spend. People are going to be able to have additional money to pay for themselves. The new minimum wage law requirement will take effect in 20 states and nearly 24 cities around the start of the new year, affecting millions of workers. The state hike range from an extra nickel per hour in Alaska to $1 an hour bump in Maine, Massachusetts, and California workers for more than 25 workers, or employers with more than 25 workers. Seattle's largest employers will have to pay workers at least $16 an hour starting Tuesday. In New York City, many businesses will have to pay at least $15 an hour of Monday. That's more than twice the federal minimum wage laws. You can also write this in a sense of the minimum wage laws in federally are abominably low, but nobody can live off of that, and that the increase in these states, which somehow try to mitigate the difficulties of life of the people in these societies. A variety of new state laws. There were a lot of ballot initiatives that were put forth. Many of these ballot initiatives were pretty lefty, and this including increasing minimum wage in some states. State and local laws come amid a multi-year push by unions and liberal to raise, yes. In Arkansas and Missouri, voters this fall approved a ballot measure raising the minimum wage after state legislators did not. In Missouri, minimum wage will rise from $7.85 to $8.60 an hour on Tuesday as the first of 5 annual increases take effect. At Granny Schaefer's in Joplin, waitress Shauna Green will have her base pay go up. She has mixed emotions about it. Why do you have mixed emotions about your base pay going up? We have regulars, and they'll notice, and they'll bring it to our attention, like it's our fault and our doing. The menu prices are offering, she said. They'll back off of something that's usually their tips, or they don't come as often. Now, her problem here is not necessarily that the minimum wage has gone up. Her issue here is, are people going to be willing to pay for this? This goes to a question of us as a larger society to some degree. The capitalistic system, especially from the standpoint of the capitalists, they want to lower the amount that they pay their workers and lower the amount it costs to produce a particular item so they can offer it at a particular rate. Now, that's assuming they don't have an exploitative relationship with the customer in something like a medical profession. But what she's talking about here is the incentive, the pressure, in order to have wages low where you can order a product at a certain price. Again, I make the point that it doesn't have to be a situation where this takes place in this way. It is the capitalists that's making a decision on how much they're going to pay their workers and how much of an excess they're going to take off. In this case, the point is, what's the excess? Let's talk about it from the context of Walmart. Walmart is a multi-billion-dollar company. This multi-billion-dollar company essentially sucks up a certain amount of excess for itself while trying to pay its workers as little as possible. Paying those workers as little as possible allows them to offer their products at a dirt cheap cost, which is customers who don't necessarily think about the workers in this process love Walmart for. Walmart is keeping an excess. Again, this is a billion-dollar company. But part of the reason and the way they're able to keep that excess is by not paying their workers a decent wage. Those workers often, sometimes requires federal assistance. If those workers are getting some kind of federal assistance because Walmart is not paying their people a decent wage, even though Walmart is a multi-billion-dollar company, then Walmart is a welfare queen because Walmart is essentially leaning on the federal government to make sure that their people are able to live. We can do better than that. You can report this as, oh my God, eggs are going up 20 cents at these places, or the federal minimum wage is abysmally low, and this $15 or $16 or $8 an hour is just the least that can be done in order to ensure that the people and our citizens in our society can live a relatively decent and secure life. Here's a newsflash. $8.70 is not going to be a decent life, and I would argue that even $15 an hour is too low to have somewhat of a decent living standard. But the framing of this matters, and this is a bizarre framing for something that the public, agrees with. Because otherwise they wouldn't have did the ballot initiative. And let's be honest, it's needed because $15 an hour, I would argue, is not enough to live a relatively decent, stable life. Let's see, right here. In May, so a series of studies, let's go right here. Economic studies by the minimum wage have shown that some workers do benefit while others might see their work hours reduced. Businesses have placed a higher value on experienced workers, making it more challenging for entry-level jobs. Again, this entire perspective of this, the whole point of the minimum wage increases was so people will have additional money in their pocket. And the entire article leans on this, oh my God, people are going to have to pay $20 or 20 cents more for their eggs. But this right here, a series of studies in the University of Washington produced evolving conclusions. In May, the researchers determined that the Seattle increase to $11 an hour had insignificant effect on employment, but that the hike to $13 an hour had resulted in a large drop in employment. They said that the higher minimum wage led to a 6.9% decline in the hours worked for those earning under $19 an hour, resulting in the net reduction on paychecks. The entire perspective of this, let's see. In October, however, those same researchers reached a contrasting conclusion. They said the Seattle workers employed at low wage experienced a modest reduction in hours worked after the minimum wage increase, but nonetheless saw a net increase in the average pre-tax earnings of $10 a week. That gain generally went to those who already had been working more hours, while those that worked less hours saw no significant change in their overall earnings. I'm not gonna belabor the point. My point is this: $7.25 an hour is abysmally little, and let's be honest, nobody is going to be able to live off that. If a person is working in our particular society, do we believe that it's fair that they're not able to take care of themselves? I think the majority of Americans will look at this and say, well, no, if you work a job, if you work a wage, if you work during the course of a week, you should be able to take care of yourself. $15 an hour is the least. It's the least for doing such a thing. So, let's see. Somebody is here because I saw a starship fly off. Let's see. Stephanie Chatu. Hi, Stephanie. Hello, Stephanie. Alright, so I'm going to end this. I see something about Sanders. I see something about Sanders. Alright, I'm going to end this. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. Thanks so.